Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
And welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week, Ethan Freeman returns to us to celebrate 40 years of Les Miserables. Ethan Freeman performs the role of Javert in Les Miserables on West End. During his run, he was often called the most emotional Javert by audiences. During his career, Ethan performed the role of Erik, the Phantom of the Opera, on West End, as well as in Toronto, Vienna, and Essen, Germany. He also originated the role of the Beast in the European premiere of Beauty and the Beast, and the role of Jekyll and Hyde in the original German language version of the musical, as well as creating the role of Luigi Lucheni in the original production of Elisabeth das Musical, amongst many other roles. Ethan currently stars as Rabanus in Die Päpstin. I hope you will enjoy the show. Congratulations with 40 years of Les Miserables.
Okay, thank you. I am very grateful that I was able to play my small part for the almost year that I did the show. It's still a great honor to have been a part of it, and it's crazy that it's 40 years. But then again, I realized that I've been at this next year for 45 years. So my career is even a little bit older than Les Miserables, but not much. And yeah, it was great to have been able to perform in that show, in that role. It's, you know, what can I say? It's an extreme honor to have been able to do it in London and have my shot at doing the show and meeting all the people who created it. And, you know, just one of the highlights of my 45-year career.
How did you first hear of the show?
That's a good question. I think that just generally in the mid 80s, it sort of appeared on the horizon. I had been vaguely aware of it having been done in Paris originally in a French version. I think that was before it actually ended up at Royal Shakespeare Company. And then it just sort of, word of it gradually disseminated into the cultural world. In 85, I was still actually in Vienna and had not yet really commenced my musical career. I was still studying more classical and opera, operetta, you know, with obviously an eye towards doing anything that came along. And I honestly don't remember the very first time I became really aware of the show. But obviously, when it came out in London, I think at that point, I started to hear about it. I had, to be honest, never really read the novel. I only read large sections of it later when I was coming closer to actually being part of the show. So I know that my sister read the novel when she was a teenager and was always so touched by the story of Eponine, particularly for some reason.
Yes.
I think she, you know, saw herself in that character. And but other than that, I had not had a tremendous amount of exposure to the original novel or to many of the films and the predecessors of the show as it became a musical. So it was all quite new to me. I did not end up seeing the show in London until quite a bit later, quite a bit after it opened. And I did see it, however, before I was actually in it. But, you know, it obviously, with songs like Bring Him Home, and I mean, it all just rapidly became part of our musical theater environment. And that was actually the time that I was moving out of my opera studies and into the beginnings of my musical career. So it became more and more present in my consciousness.
I heard you say at one point that even though you performed Javert, you personally could relate to Valjean more. Is that still true for you?
I think it's quite possible to relate to both characters. I'm trying to think of what I must have meant. Perhaps I see a little bit more of a Valjean personality in myself than I do a character like Javert, who obviously has a cold objectivity and, I'm trying to think of the English word, sternness and rigidity that I don't think is so much a part of my personality. I probably relate more to the noble character of Valjean, perhaps, but on the other hand, I am certainly not a saint or a person of such courage and high moral regard. I sort of fall probably in between those two characters in some way. So I don't think I'm that personally that close to either of those personalities, which makes it actually more interesting to explore them as an actor, to figure out how someone would develop a personality like either of the characters, and then turn back and relate it to myself. And that's, for me, the interesting point in a character study and studying a role and recreating a role in a show, even if it's obviously not necessarily new, is to find those points in myself that are things that are attached to those personalities, and developing them so that gradually I am able to, quote unquote, become the character, or the character infiltrates me and I'm able to give a realistic depiction of that personality. Those are the little secret connections that hopefully make a good stage performance in a role.
It's interesting with in regards to Javert that as a lot of Les Miserables fans, and with me too, is that you at first when you're younger you don't really understand his point of view, but once you grow up and you can more and more understand where he is coming from and why he is doing what he does.
Yes, I mean, he's most of us are very uncomfortable with disorder, and I think that Javert's almost pathological need to have a controlled environment does certainly become more understandable as you get older. I think when we're young, we even have a desire for a certain amount of chaos, and insanity is not quite the right word, but wildness that helps us find our borders. But once we do develop psychological and emotional borders for ourselves, we are very easily irritated and disturbed or frightened or angry when people behave outside of what we consider our emotional borders. And I think Javert's trauma as a child, as he was growing up, coming from a very bad situation, a difficult upbringing in a part of the world in a time where I'm sure misery was prevalent everywhere, for him to construct a moral scaffolding for himself that, a code, if you want to put it that way, that cannot be broken, and that everyone who does break outside of his moral code, that he can't stand seeing anyone outside of that, and they become an evil and a criminal. And it's a very rigid way of seeing the world, but you know, there are quite a lot of people like that. And if they, you know, end up in positions of power, obviously they can make life miserable for anyone who they see as falling outside of their moral boundaries. I think that's, you know, Javert is an obvious case of that. And I think, as you say, as we mature, we do have more and more of a need for security, for cohesion, for a realm we understand. And at that point, you have obviously a certain amount of sympathy with a character like Javert, even though he's the antagonist
Yes.
of the character we're supposed to love and admire even more. And that's what makes it a great role. And that's what makes it a great and very profound conflict between the two characters. You know, who is good, who is evil, who is the more moral of those two characters. And obviously, the character that is more rigid, in this case, Javert, and unable to bend, eventually breaks.
When his world changes, he goes, because of that act of kindness from Valjean in the story, he goes completely insane because it doesn't fit what he thinks is his reality.
Yes, yes, he can't deal with a world which is so confused for him that he decides to take his life. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount of psychological trauma in his background and rigidity emotionally, and you know, he can only reflect up to a certain point, at which point he is no longer able to tolerate the feeling of loss of control, of not understanding the world anymore. I think the lines in Javert's Suicide are, you know, pretty clear about why it is that he cannot deal with life anymore.
Your Javert is said to be the most emotional one ever in Javert's Suicide. Did you do that consciously?
Mine is? Oh,
Yes.
I don't know. I think when you're about to kill yourself on stage, it's pretty emotional. I know that some performers who play Javert do not probably go as far as I wanted to in terms of having a breakdown there and questioning their rigid view of the universe. But for me, you know, it's the crux of, you know, what do you feel like when you discover that your entire view of your philosophy of life has been basically wrong, to the point that you cannot live anymore, to the point where you have to take your own life. For me, that denotes a certain amount of emotional insecurity and collapse. And that's obviously something I tried to transport in preparation for killing myself. So for me, that was obviously the necessary degree of emotion, and the production supported me in that decision. So I don't really compare myself to anyone else specifically, but for me, it was important to go far in that, as far as that's concerned, emotionally.
Yes, apparently it was at one point I found this that a woman who was in the audience said, oh my God, does he need psychological help or something like that?
I think everyone in our business needs psychological help at some point. Well, I don't know. Obviously, if you're viewing someone who's considering suicide, that should, in fact, for me, be the impression you get of them, is that they need psychological help. Because if they didn't, they probably wouldn't be about to jump into the Seine, which is, as I was in Paris recently, jumping off a bridge into the Seine would certainly demand a lot of pain. put it that way. In order to make me jump off a bridge into the Seine, I would have to be emotionally a lot more desperate than I've ever been in my life, thank goodness.
How did you become part of the show?
I had originally auditioned for the Vienna production. I was doing Cats in Hamburg, and Vienna announced auditions both for Les Mis and for Phantom. And Les Mis was going first. I think was slated to open in the fall of '88, and Phantom about 3 months later, in December of '88. And I went and auditioned for both shows, got a very positive response from both leading teams. And the Les Mis leading team was Gail Edwards, was directing the Vienna production. They liked me, but they weren't quite sure what to do with me. I was only 28, 29. They had me audition for pretty much all the male roles. And I think they had their eye on me as a Javert, but I suspect they found me a little bit immature, which I'm sure I was at that age. And at the same time, I had auditioned for Phantom, and Hal Prince had also taken to me. And although I was also very, very young, too young to play the Phantom, that offer came out first. And, I had a long exchange with Hal Prince and with the producers, who, said to me right after the auditions, "We want you for something, but we're not sure what yet." But it was clear that it was going to be a main role in one show or the other. And Hal Prince urged me to take the position of alternate Phantom. And I thought, if Hal Prince is urging me to do that, that's probably a good idea. And that's how that ended up happening. So I didn't get another shot at Les Mis then until 1997, when I was playing the Phantom in Toronto. And Hardy Rudolph, another German actor who was performing Javert in the West End, was going to leave the show. They were, putting in a new cast in October of 97, I guess. And I, was informed that John Caird was in New York and would like to see me. So I think I flew down on my day off and sang the stuff from the show for John Caird at a studio with wonderful acoustics in New York. I was always, it's nice to sing stars here. And he gave me the thumbs up, basically. And then, things got sorted out with Cameron McIntosh. And I already knew that I would be leaving Phantom that fall, or that summer, I guess. And was very pleased that I would be able to go right back to London and move into the Les Mis company. And, that's how that happened. It was one of those wonderful, blissful days where pretty much everything goes right at your audition. And, one of the original creative directors is there and is very positive. And so it was a great feeling. I flew back to Toronto. Either that day I probably went home to my family for a day, and then flew back to Toronto the next day and went back into the show, knowing I had, at least sung, according to my satisfaction. And a couple of days later, the yes from Cameron's office came.
Do you remember any special moments from your time on the show?
Many, but nothing so memorable that it strikes me spontaneously to say, oh, that was the crowning moment. I mean, we had, I was in a little bit before the rest of the new company, I believe, and I was still working with Jeff Layton, was the Valjean still for another month or so, and then Stig Rossen was coming in to take over Valjean. I think Hardy had to leave the contract a little bit early. That's why I came in a little bit early. It was the 12th anniversary show, sort of 12th anniversary cast. And I remember that to the opening night of the cast, Trevor Nunn came in and watched the show and came to my dressing room afterwards and said hello. And, you know, there were many moments of just, it's a long time ago, so I'm trying to put the little pieces together, but it was just a very special time, and I have more general impressions than anything specific. I'm sure we had a few celebratory shows, you know, around the holidays, and those are always special moments. And you know, it was a fantastic cast, and it was, you know, I was just sort of gradually moving into a new house in London, and you know, taking the tube in or driving into work, and just routine basically. So typical life of a performer, I think, and you know, it being 20 odd years ago, I think a lot of not a lot of amazing special moments are crystallizing out from me right now, but it was just a, you know, really good time working in a great show. I mean, the audience was always, even, you know, even the show had been running for years, it was still a very special evening for people coming in to see the show, and just, you know, a huge honor to be a part of it.
I heard John Owen Jones once say he made his Valjean debut with you.
Yes, it's quite probable, because he was, I guess he was sort of an alternate. I'm not sure if he was an alternate. I think he was an alternate already and did 2 shows a week. So it's very likely that he would have done his Valjean premiere with me. He was 25, but he was obviously already an absolute fantastic Valjean. He always, you know, sang the role gorgeously and was, you know, a very passionate character. And although he was very young, he absolutely filled the role tremendously. So I had great Valjeans at that point.
He said he was, you were a Phantom in the first version of Phantom he saw, so it was a special moment for him to work with you.
Wow, okay. I didn't know that. That's interesting. He never, I don't recall him mentioning that to me. But no, that's one of the magical kinds of things that happen in our theater world. And, you know, every now and then someone will come up to you and say, you were the first person I saw do this or this or this. And it really influenced me. And that's one of those magical moments for us. In the theater, to know that, you know, what we were doing, did really affected someone, usually in a positive way. Anyone come to me and say, I saw you in this and that, and never wanted to see the show again, or that's why I never didn't become an actor. No, I've never heard that. But again, then again, I guess no one would say that. But no, I'm really glad that I got a chance to do that show with him. I'm very sorry that I never got to see him. I'm sure he was tremendous in that as well. Great guy.
What do you think makes Les Miserables so enduring?
Another good question. I think it is the characters. They are so close to us. Generally, I think every person pretty much in the world, certainly in our culture, would be able to see himself in one of character or the other. I say for my sister, it was Eponine. And for some young people, it's Enjolras, perhaps. I think many of us aspire to be a person like Valjean. Many of us see a person like Javert and are moved in a positive or negative way, as perhaps they see someone who's the oppressor. I think that obviously the show touches a political nerve and a societal nerve. And aside from that, the music is just fantastic. I think it's dynamic, it's touching, the texts are good. I mean, a song like On My Own, just for an example, is so much about what young people feel who are undergoing rejection, for example, or the feelings that a father might have for either his son or his child or someone who fills that position, like Bring Him Home, is just goes straight to the heart of the matter. And I think that pretty much everyone responds very strongly emotionally to some aspect of the show, some aspect of the music. And you have obviously the lighter characters. I mean, the Thénardiers aren't light characters, they're actually very heavy, but they're funny. They're we know them too. Everyone knows someone like Thénardier. Some people may vote for someone like Thénardier for high office. And so I think they're all very archetypical characters, and that's why the show has been successful for so long. I think it's the story of power and oppression and yearning and romance, passion, rivalry, bitterness. I mean, all of these very deep human emotions are dealt with in the show, and with the most dramatic and powerful musical aspects that you can think of, even though it's not an opera, it's not a classical opera, it's a rock pop musical, but the music is so well matched with the drama. I think those are the things that make it such a strong and long-running piece of theater.
Very true. I mean, as I said, it was my second obsession after Phantom when I was young, and the many tapes I have of me singing on my own.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural. I mean, who hasn't felt rejected at some point in their lives?
Yes.
And also the moment of Eponine's death is that sort of ultimate tragedy. Someone who dies for love. It touches part of any of us, I think.
I also remember me scanning for in the book for all the sections with Eponine and later on Fantine, the tragedy. It's weird how exciting it is when you're a teenager.
Yeah. As I said, I did not fall in love with the story as a teenager, which I was falling in love with other stories at that point, but I had not dealt with Les Miserables yet. I had heard of the name of the book, but I was more into the Russian novelists, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, when I was young. So I didn't have that much contact to the French epics, but I did later.
Yeah. I think sometimes that's a story that comes later or earlier. It's just strange with Les Miserables.
Yeah. But it, at the end of the day, it's I'm so glad and grateful that I had a chance to, help tell that story, is how I would put it.
I think the connection of Javert and Valjean is such a strong piece in the story as well.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, you always think, oh, well, if they could just get together and have a drink and get it sorted out, they would probably have found, more in common on a human level than they thought they had. But that didn't happen. So it would not have been good to have a happy ending as far as that's concerned, or realistic.
I want her to say, so the whole story was just because of a piece of bread.
A piece of, yes.
Yes.
But perhaps that is a metaphor for the strange chaos that is our existence, that some tiny act like stealing a piece of bread changes the world in many ways. And certainly on a cultural level, I mean, how many people have seen the world a little bit differently because of those characters, and at a professional level, how many actors and actresses have taken part in this story over the years because of that piece of bread. It's meant work for a lot of us.
I think it's amazing, and with many stories and actors who have been both in the Les Miserables and Phantom. It's such an amazing journey.
Absolutely, certainly has been for me.
And Phantom is 40 next year.
Wow! Oh wow! Okay, that's true. That's true.
That's also such a coincidence how two such defining musicals came back to back.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how that it's just the luck of fate, I suppose.
Yes.
That because the shows are very different, they don't have a lot to do with each other than playing in Paris, and other than dealing with great romantic subjects, put it that way. But that they should have come so close to each other, particularly for those of us of that earlier generation who got to know and perform the shows in a fairly short period of time. It was probably the greatest bit of luck. I mean, then for me, I would add Elisabeth on and Beauty and the Beast and all those big things that happened for me, sort of in between Phantom and Les Mis. But those are also the two roles that I played in the West End. They were definitely part of what defines my career. So it's amazing luck on my part.
I think it was just an era where great and romantic musicals just spoke to the people.
I think the 80s generally was a time of escapism, different than in our social media age. But when I look back to the 80s, I think it was a time when grand romantic themes presented in what was for the time very bombastic way, obviously fit Western culture at that point.
I see a lot of younger people now say they miss the gothic romance from that time. So I think it's coming back.
Well, it's still here. I mean, Phantom is back in Vienna, and Beauty and the Beast is coming back to Vienna. Okay, Beauty and the Beast, the Disney shows are different ball game than the Cameron Mackintosh shows, but Phantom and Les Mis never really went away. So it's just hard to know what sort of subject matter could be treated in that way 30, 40 years later, would have a different look. The new Phantom has a different look. And I think Les Miserables has also developed over the years. I mean, James Powell actually taught me the show when he was resident director in London, and then he eventually took over the redirection of the new version. So he was, trying out his spin on the show around the time when I joined the show. and then eventually it moved more and more towards his directorial feelings, you know, while still honoring the original director, the original direction.
I think the biggest change was for Les Miserables that the revolving stage left.
Okay, to be honest, I've never seen the show in its new venue. I guess it's been 25 years since it moved. I'm not quite sure, from the Palace. So I honestly can't talk much about what came after me in terms of how the show actually works.
I think I haven't seen it in a while either, but it's a thing that I see people talk about a lot. So it was a big change for them.
Okay, yeah, well, I think because the turning stage, the Drehbühne, I wanted to say, the Revolve, obviously had an element of passing of time, and I think that was how it worked conceptually. That you know, turning through the years, that it was literally that aspect of the show of time passing. So it's hard for me to imagine the show without that scenic element, to be honest. But you know, someone else also had a clever idea, and probably technically easier to manage.
I think so. It's the same as the Phantom doesn't have the angel anymore. It's also a shame.
Yes, that I did think was a shame. I saw the new production in Vienna, and there were certain things that obviously I loved because I knew them, because I had learned to relate to those moments, and they were part of the show for me for all the years I was doing it. So it was seeing things changed. I didn't always understand or click into all aspects of the new direction, but other things I thought were handled very well and were very nice pictures. But you know, the show, I wouldn't say it lost quality, but I didn't have quite as much connection for me. On the other hand, it was interesting to see a completely new approach to it.
Yes, I still haven't dared to watch the recording of the new production because I don't know what I would think.
Yep, you take the risk, and you have your fond memories of the original production. So that's it might sting a little bit to see something new, but on the other hand, at the end of the day, if the characters work, then the show works.
Is there anything you still remember or wish to talk about with Les Miserables?
No, it was always a nice moment because Javert dies so early in the show that it was always tradition in London to die, throw yourself off the bridge, and then go have a glass of wine with the company manager. And then, you know, you had about 15 or 20 minutes till the curtain calls. So there was always time for a quick glass with whoever was running the show at that point. And that was a nice tradition for Javert's. And yeah, it's one of those roles where I think, oh, what would I do with the role that I couldn't do with the role when I was half the age I am now, or roughly. And I'm sure that I wouldn't say we all who are now older and performed roles when we were younger have misgivings, but I think if we had a chance to go back and meld our experience in life since then, in the 20, 30 years, whatever, that we've had since then, we think probably, we would be able to enrich the character even more. I mean, I think since I last played Phantom, I've experienced things in my life that would probably lead me to do one or two things a little differently. And I don't want to get into specifics, but And, obviously the same thing with a show like Nem is. I think if I could look at my 30 whatever self and with my 60 whatever eyes, and I'm sure that I would think, I would have played that this way or played that another way. But, this is not something that is humanly possible. So it's something interesting to think about as one looks at one's career and life in review. I think that applies to all areas of life.
I think it's a shame there still is the time machine to go back to tell yourself something in the past or whatever.
Yeah, but that'd be cool, but it's not going to happen
No.
in our life. So, you have to deal with what you can when you can. And I think that's, I think, you want to go and back and into the character of the story and say, Javert, look at it this way. And, but we can't do that either. So we're telling the story and teaching the story as it was created. And that's our job as actor. We're not there to treat the characters we play therapeutically, which is good, because that would make life even more confusing.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you have a message for Les Miserables fans?
Keep honoring the show, keep going and examining those characters, examine their choices, learn from their experiences. As with any great work of art, there's so much to learn there about humanity, and just keep enjoying those poignant and profound stories.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And happy birthday, Les Miserables.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.